5.03. So this is going to be the last one for this one, all right? So 5.03 is the last, I think there's only 3 lessons in this module. So next week, probably next Tuesday, next Tuesday, we're going to have like a review, all right?
Okay. Yeah, Yusuf will probably need it. Too.
All right, so we'll make the review for module 5. All right, so this one is about primate evolution. Let me see if I can change the view. All right, so this is about primate evolution, right? So can you give me some like examples of like primates? Like, what are some examples of primates?
Monkeys, gorillas, chimpanzees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so stuff like that, right? So basically, like monkey-like creatures, you could say like ape-like creatures, that kind of thing, right? So what they're talking about here is the idea of primate evolution, right? So all of these skulls, right? All of these skulls, like, okay, so if you take a look at some of these skulls here, right? Like, what kind of similarities do you see? Like, if we want to say that
the eyes, nose.
Mm-hmm. All right, but describe, like, what about the eyes? What about the nose, like that?
Like the way it's structured.
Mm-hmm. And so how would you describe them being structured? How would you describe the eye structure of the bones? The eye socket structure?
Like human, like eyes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, like human, but
so, yeah, have like a ball socket joint there. Like a round joint.
Right. So you
like a socket.
So you see, first of all, the eye sockets, right? They're facing forward, right?
Yeah.
They're not facing to the side. So a lot of creatures, like if you see like deer, that kind of thing, right? The eye sockets are pointing to the right and left a little bit more. Here, they're both pointing like basically the same direction forward, right? You can notice like they have like a larger brain structure than like most mammals, you would think, right?
Yeah.
They also have the jaw is also like it's a lot more flat right now, right? Like the nose is probably like more flat compared to some creatures, right? But but basically the front face, right, is like overall, more flat compared with like a lot of mammals and a lot of other creatures, right? So different things like that, right? So people, they look at these skulls and they find similarities and differences, between them. So then they came up with this idea of primate evolution, right? So we have these different kinds of primates, right? Like you mentioned, humans, chimpanzees, gorillas, and lemurs are all examples of different kinds of primates, right? So chimpanzees and gorillas, so human beings and chimpanzees, they have like the most common DNA, right? If you look at the DNA similarities, or if you look at the DNA and sequence it, and look at like, so we talked about DNA before, right? Like the amino acid sequence of like a protein, or the DNA sequence, right?
Yeah.
Like A, G, G, C, T, like that, right? Human beings and chimpanzees have the most similar, sequence of DNA. The other ones, lemurs and so on, they have, more and more differences, right? The more and more they look different from a human being, the more differences they have, all right? So chimpanzees, they are, their DNA is closest to a human being's DNA. A gorilla is also very close. I think chimpanzees overall are closer, but gorillas are also very, very close. I believe chimpanzees are mostly meat eaters. No, I don't say mostly, but like they do eat meat. Whereas gorillas are vegetarians. So gorillas, they do not eat, meat. Maybe unless they're like, starving or something like that. But basically their normal diet is, just completely like, fruits, vegetables, that kind of thing. So there are also like behavioral differences among them. So gorillas are like much more docile. Whereas chimpanzees are like a lot more like vicious and that kind of thing. So they've actually like I don't know if you have seen these like videos on YouTube where they study like chimpanzee groups, and they find that they actually form like gangs and attack each other and attack smaller monkeys and all kinds of stuff, right? So chimpanzees, their behavior is a lot different, than, for example, gorillas. So gorillas, they generally don't do those kinds of things, right? All right. So what are some different characteristics of primates? All right. So there are different characteristics of primates that some of them we talked about, but here are some of the characteristics. So when it comes to the hands and feet, right, they have opposable thumbs and they have large or big toes, right? So they use this for different reasons, right? So one of the most important reasons is that compared to other mammals, a a human being or other kinds of primates are able to grasp onto things and hold things very precisely, right?
Yes.
What does it mean opposable thumb? It means that you can take your thumb and you can take it and you can just like when people make like tasbih, right? When people
Yeah.
make, you can take your thumb and go to each digit on your fingers, right? Or you can join with each finger, right? So that way you can you can grasp onto like an object like a stick, a rock, whatever it is, right? If you have
Yeah.
some other creature like a tiger, can a tiger like really like grasp and hold on to
No,
something?
they
No, right?
can't grasp it.
Right. So it cannot do that, right? So so that's a very important difference. So with this, right, so now there are other creatures that have some ability like this, like a bird, right? A bird, its feet can grasp onto things, but obviously it has wings as well, right? So it's not very precise, right? Feet are generally more for like moving and walking around, so they can grasp onto some things with their feet, with the claw, with their talons or whatever on their feet, but it's not very precise. It's not the same way that a primate uses its hands. So the primate can use its hands and use tools very effectively. So other kinds of primates, they also use tools. Chimpanzees, gorillas, they all use tools. They found gorillas. They take like a plant. They take like a big leaf, and they can turn it into like a cup, and then they can collect water and drink it use like a cup, stuff like that. So this is a very important adaptation, and it goes well with like a large brain where you can control and use your hands to do different kinds of things. All right. Fingers and toes, they show a lot of sensitivity, right? So because so this kind of goes together with opposable thumbs, right? If you want to use your hands, and grasp it and use tools effectively, you have to have a lot of sensitivity. So you have a lot of nerve endings in your fingers, so that you can really use like you take like a pencil and use it to write very precisely, that kind of thing, right? So we're looking at some pictures of some of these characteristics. So this is an opposable thumb, right? You can take your thumb and you can you can join together with each of your other fingers. All right. So this is very important for creatures that live, especially in the trees. So it's important for using tools. It's important for living in the trees. So have you heard of like the word arbor or arboreal? Or there's something called Arbor Day, like tree day, anything like that? So whenever you see the word arbor or any derivative word, this has to do with trees, right? So a lot of these primates, they live in the trees. So this is important for grasping onto branches and swinging from one tree to the other and that kind of thing, right? And just like we talked about other creatures like tigers and stuff, they don't have this, right? They can't grasp onto objects.
Yeah. They can just like tap on it, but they can't really
Right.
like grab it.
Right. So they can probably use their claws to dig a hole or something, right? But that's not the same
They
thing.
can like claw in, but they can't really like grasp it.
Right. Yeah, correct. All right, good. All right, depth perception. All right, what do you think the word depth perception means?
Depth perception of how depth your finger can like close.
Right.
Probably. Like if your own finger can like touch itself.
Kind of, yeah. So depth means like how far away something is, right?
Yeah.
Like for example, if you look at the depth in the ocean, right? There's some things that are near the surface that are at a higher, lower depth, and then the higher, or you say, the larger the depth is, the farther you're going down into the ocean. So depth perception means that we're able to tell if something is close or far away, right? So that's why, for example, people can look at a basketball hoop or something, and they can, throw a basketball because intuitively you kind of know how far away it is, right? You can kind of look at
Yeah.
something quickly and kind of have a general idea, not like necessarily measurements in terms of feet or meters, but you can kind of tell just like, how far away that thing is, right? So this is called depth perception. So this in order to have depth perception, you need two eyes, right? Because if you just have one eye and you're looking at something, well, you don't know how far away it is. Maybe the object looks small, but maybe it's close, but it's just really small. Or what if
Yeah.
an object looks big, but it could be just really far away, and it's just really it's just very large. So what you need is you need two eyes, right? So this picture over here
Yeah.
is showing you how people determine depth perception. So you focus on something. So if you focus on something and you have to kind of,
Have both of your eyes facing towards it.
yeah, you have to. If you have to, if the angle you see, in the first set, the angles are very different, right? One is pointing significantly to the left, the other is pointing significantly to the right. So that kind of focus, that kind of movement of the eyes is necessary if you want to focus on something that's close, right? So your eye, you have nerves that sense like how what angle your eyes are directed toward is directed at, right? This one over here, right? If something is like very far away, then you see the both eyes are pointing almost straight forward, right? So that there's that signal in your brain tells your brain that hey, that thing is far away. Right? Does that make sense? The difference between these two?
Yeah.
All right. So based on this, the brain can perceive and figure out how far away something is.
Yeah.
All right. Maternal care, right? What does maternal mean? Have you heard the word maternal before?
Like mom sides of family.
Right. You have like maternal, paternal, right?
Yes.
So maternal care means that primates, they have smaller litter sizes, right? They have less, they don't have like rabbits or like smaller mammals. They have like a large number of babies. So primates, and like basically kind of the larger the creature gets, like even like elephants and stuff like that, the smaller the number of babies they have. So they just have like a smaller litter size, but that one or two babies, they have to develop. They take a longer period of time to develop inside the mother, and as well as growing and learning, how to live and how to survive and find food and all that kind of stuff. It takes them a longer period of time. So for a human being, right, obviously it takes, at least like, 14, 15, 16, sometimes, longer than that to, to kind of grow and like have, like a mature brain, right? So
Yeah.
I think according to some studies, they say that the brain doesn't really like mature into like complete, the brain doesn't stop developing and maturing until age like 25 or 26, something like that.
Yeah, that's when you actually like develop your personality.
Yeah. So I mean, before that, so it's not that person is not an adult before that, but even until 20. So even
It's
people,
not like a complete adult.
right. It's not like a complete adult. You're just an adult, but the brain is still developing, growing, and learning different kinds of things. So this is what it means that they have few offspring, but they take a lot of much more effort and time to take care of those few offsprings. Right? So we talked about brain, right? So part of the reason for that, for maternal care, for taking such a long period of time, is that the brain, right, is much larger, right? So this is a human brain over here, right, all the way to the right. This is like some kind of cross section, right? So, but you can see that the other primates, right, they have smaller brains, but still they are, they're pretty significant, right? When it comes to the animal world, right, they're still very, very large, right? So primates in general, they have large brains, right? So one of the important measurements is not just the size of the brain, but the size of the brain relative to the body side. So that ratio kind of tells you how smart something is, right? So it's not just about the brain size, but you take the size of the brain and divide by the size of the entire body, right?
Okay.
That gives you like a ratio. So that ratio can tell you, how intelligent a creature is. Because, for example, like a whale, a blue whale, has a very very large brain, right? But
Yeah.
it's not as smart as a primate, right?
Because it's like the brain is small compared to its body.
Right, correct. If you take that ratio, it's still going to be smaller, right? So they found that so they looked at birds, for example, right? So they looked at birds and they did some studies where they showed that so they took like a whole bunch of different species of birds, and they found that those birds that have higher brain to body size, they're the more intelligent bird. Even if like another bird has like a larger brain, it's that ratio that tells you how smart something is. So some birds are not, all that smart. They say that shorebirds, do you know what shorebirds are?
No.
So they live by the shore. Like probably, have you seen so birds that live near the shore?
Like pelicans.
Yeah. I think pelican is considered a shorebird. They often have, like
Flamingos.
yeah, probably flamingos are also probably considered it. So there's different kinds of things like sandpipers and stuff like that. So they're the ones that like they go along the shore and they look and they dig down into the dirt to find like different worms on the beach and stuff like that. And they're often colored like the beach. Like the beach is like basically kind of like white or light sand with some dark speckled rocks. So they often look like that, right? But in any case, those birds they don't do like a whole lot. All they do is kind of go around, look for food. They don't have like a very high brain to body size. But for example, like a crow or other birds like that, they actually use tools, and they found they're very sophisticated, and they actually like develop different types of tools. They take like leaves, and they cut the leaves into different shapes that are useful, right?
I can probably like take an example like the Pablo story.
Which story?
Like where like a crow like use like pebbles to get the water up to drink
Oh yeah,
it.
yeah. I think that's like an Aesop's fable or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe they came up with that story because somebody noticed a crow using tools, and they figured out a crow was smart or something. There was another thing. I don't know if you heard about it. They have this video on YouTube. So like crows, they figured out that if they took some different kinds of nuts, right? So a crow doesn't have like a strong beak to like crack open nuts, right? Some birds they have that, but a crow doesn't. But what they found is that they took these nuts, and they would drop them onto a road, right? Why do you think they would drop them onto the road?
So it could break by hitting a car.
Exactly, right? So they figured out that hey, these cars are coming, and when the tire rolls over it, it's going to crush whatever is underneath. So they would drop them on the road and wait for a car to come and crush it. They would go quickly and eat the go and pick it up. So they figured out how to do stuff like that. So they're pretty intelligent. All right. So those are some of the characteristics of primates.
Okay.
So based on this, right? So based on different pieces of fossil evidence and DNA evidence, people came up with different types of relationships among the different primates, right? So this is an idea that people have about how primates could be related, right? So we don't know exactly like how Allah decided to create all these different kinds of creatures, but this is one idea that maybe He used this kind of method to create them. So obviously this is based on the fossil record and DNA evidence, and so it's not so nobody obviously lived a long time ago, a million years ago, when all this was happening. So people are putting together clues and trying to figure out what happened. So this is some idea that some people they have. So anyways, based on this idea, this is how they're arranging it. So they say that there was some ancestral primate, and then it divided into two groups. All right. See at the bottom, it divided into two groups. So one goes to the right, and one goes to the left. So the one that goes to the left formed the lemurs. All right, the lemurs came from that group. The one that formed to the right, right, formed everybody else, right? So the ones that formed to the right, again, in each step they divide. Do you see how at each step they divide into two groups? Each step divide into two groups. Here again, two groups. So basically you can see, for example, all right, so let me ask you a question. So according to this graph, all right, take the orangutan, right, orangutan, all right? Is the orangutan more closely related to a gibbon or an old world monkey? What do you say?
Can you please repeat that?
Yeah, so I'm asking the orangutan, is it more closely related to a gibbon or an old world monkey?
Old word. Old word. The old world monkey.
So it's more closely related to a gibbon. So do you see the orangutan here?
Yeah.
The gibbon here and the old world monkey. So you see the orangutan, if you go back, in the gibbon you go back. They have this common ancestor right here. Do you see this?
Okay.
Right? From the gibbon it goes here, over here to the orangutan like this. So so if you want to go to the old world monkey, if you want to have the orangutan go to the and the old world monkey have a common ancestor, you have to go farther back. You see, you have to go all the way back over here.
Yeah.
So this over here is an earlier ancestor. So the gibbon and the orangutan, they have an ancestor that's much closer to the present day. Whereas for the old world, whether if you want to find a common ancestor for the orangutan and the old world monkey, then you have to go all the way back over here, right? You see how you have to kind of go back a little bit more? Does that make sense or no?
Yes, it does.
So that means that, you know, the old world monkey and the orangutan, they have like a much earlier common ancestor, so they're not as closely related as the orangutan and the gibbon. All right, so this is over here, misconception alert. So what this is saying is that some people think that human beings evolved from modern day chimpanzees, orangutans. So if you go back over here, for example, let's say a human and an old world monkey, right? The common ancestor is right over here, right? So the old world monkeys are living in the present day. So, so none of these creatures on the top over here, evolved from, another creature at the top over here. You have to go back in time to find this theoretical common ancestor over here. Right? So for example, the lemur and the New World, so for example, you wouldn't say that the New World monkey evolved from the lemur, right? They both evolved from this common ancestor all the way back over here that used to exist sometime, they say, 50 million years ago. Does that make sense, the difference?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this right over here is going over, this is one theory about how human beings, evolved from different creatures. All right. So we're gonna go through like the different steps that are that are being shown in this picture. All right. So this picture over here shows on the x-axis and the y-axis, right? So on the x-axis, it's showing brain capacity, right? So on the left is a lower brain capacity, on the right is the higher brain capacity, right? On the right is in cubic centimeters, all right? So from left to right, all right? So on the y-axis, it shows millions of years ago. So for example, if you take this creature over here, Homo erectus, all right? So this line over here, this green line over here, right? On the x-axis, it's at about 1,000, right? So that means that its brain capacity is about 1,000 cubic centimeters, all right? And then it lived, right, starting about maybe like 1.8 million years ago, all the way up to maybe like zero point 0.2 or 0.3 million years ago, right? Does that make sense? So on the y-axis, it extends from here all the way up here, right? So this is telling you, this is, kind of giving us a correlation between brain capacity and how many millions of years ago that something lived, right? So what do you notice any kind of like pattern going on in this picture?
Mm. Yeah, there's like a pattern-ish.
And what kind of pattern do you see between brain capacity and millions of years ago?
Like of how their brain was also bigger, but their body was like the skull were bigger too.
Kind of. So let's take a look. So go back to the earlier ones, right? If we go all the way back like 3 million years ago, what is the brain capacity of those ones? Is it on the lower end of the spectrum or the higher end of the spectrum?
The higher end.
Not quite. If we go back 3 million, you see right
over
here,
that side.
this is the lower end, right? 3, 4,
Yeah.
500, right? But as we go closer and closer towards the present day, 0 is the present day, right? If I say
Yeah.
0 million years ago, that's like today, right? So as we get closer and closer to the present day, what's happening to the brain capacity?
It's increasing.
It's increasing, right? So that's the relationship that they're showing, right? So these creatures that they found in the fossil record over here, 3 million years ago, they have a smaller brain capacity, and those creatures that are found, closer to the present day, they have a much larger brain capacity, right? So based on this, they're coming up with this idea that that these creatures over here were an earlier, ancestor, and over time they slowly evolved until they became these creatures over here, right? So they put the human skull right over here, Homo sapiens, right? They put the human skull right over here, all right? They put this creature over here. Have you heard of this one? The Neanderthal, right? Have you heard that term before or no?
Homo. No.
Yeah. So
No.
so
I only
Neander.
heard Homo sapiens before.
Yeah. So Homo sapiens is the name for a human being. That's like the species name. Neanderthal is another creature. So they're saying that the Neanderthal has a higher brain capacity. All right. But the Neanderthal, even though it had a higher, brain size, it's not considered to be as intelligent, right?
Yeah.
So this field is called paleoanthropology. So this is a mix of two words: paleontology, right, the study of ancient life forms. Like, have you heard of like paleontologists and stuff like that, right? People who go out and
No.
dig for fossils and that kind of thing. So,
Mm,
so maybe you've heard of like people who go out and dig up, dinosaur bones and that kind of thing.
yeah.
And then anthropology, which is the study of human beings.
Okay.
So, based on this, there's like a list of different species that they believe is in the line of in the evolutionary line from earliest, from a long time ago till the present day. So we're just going to go through and look at some of the characteristics of some of these different skulls. All right, so this one over here, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's like Sahelanthropus chadensis, something like that. So, have you heard of the word Sahel before? Sahel.
No.
So, have you heard like the Sahara Desert?
Yes.
So I think the Sahel is like an area like near there. I believe it's somewhere over there in
Ah.
Africa. They call it the Sahel. I think it's kind of like a transition zone between the Sahara Desert and a place where plants can grow, something like that. But in any case, so they probably found this in Africa somewhere. Oh yeah, sorry, here it is, Chad, Africa. So what they're saying here is that this one over here, this skull has a downward oriented foramen magnum. So what does that mean? So the skull at the very bottom has like a hole in it, has like a giant hole. Why do you think the skull has like a, think about like your head, like why do you think there's like a giant hole at the bottom of the skull?
Giant hole.
Mm-hmm.
For your throat muscles,
Uh,
like your throat and your tongue.
okay, that's good. That's a good point. So how about in the bones? So the bones are all the way in the back, the vertebral bones in the spinal column, right? So there's a hole at the bottom of the skull to connect with the spinal column, with the spinal cord. So the reason is because the brain is in your skull, right? But you need to get from the brain, you need to be able to connect to the whole body. So the brain, like the very bottom of it, goes through that hole and becomes the spinal cord, right? So if you look at a human being walks upright, right? Right? Like a human being doesn't walk on like four legs, right? So do you see in this picture, if you're walking upright, the hole in the skull must be at the very bottom, right?
Yes.
But look at these creatures over here on the left, right? Like this creature here all the way on the left, it's like more so, kind of hunched over. It's more closer to like walking on four legs, right? So you see in this case, imagine like if a creature is walking on four legs, it's not going to have a hole in its skull at the bottom. It's going to have it like horizontally on the left. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like imagine if you have a tiger, right? Right. A tiger does not stand upright, right? It looks closer to this creature on the left. So the hole in its skull that connects with his spinal column is going to be sticking out to the side, right? It's not going to have a hole on the bottom, right?
Yes.
So they're saying that this creature has a hole at the bottom of the skull, right? So that suggests that this is one of the earliest apes that used to stand upright. All right. So this one over here is another creature called Australopithecus afarensis. Right? So this creature over here, right, it also walked upright, but it also had so it's also walking upright, but it still has many ape-like creatures. Ape-like traits, such as curved toes. All right. So why do you think it could have curved toes? So a human being doesn't necessarily have like curved toes, right? But this creature does have curved toes. So why do you think that could be the case? Like, why would an ape have like curved toes?
Because they're probably walking.
Not so much for walking, but maybe because like an ape might need to, swing in the trees and hold on to branches with its toes as well, right?
Yeah.
So like I think like a chimpanzee has curved toes, because if you're living in the trees, right, you're not necessarily touching the ground. So it's useful to have, like if a human being is walking on the ground, it's useful to have like flat, relatively flat feet, so that you can, walk on the ground well. But if you're living in the trees, right, you don't need to walk on the ground. You want to be able to grasp a branch with your toes as well as your hands, right? So they're saying this one still has, curved toes. However, and it still has an ape-like face, right, with its jaw kind of protruding out a little bit, right? But it's saying that it's still a little bit flatter than apes used to be. But you see over here in this skull, its jaw is kind of protruding out, right? Its face is not like completely
like
flat.
A beak type.
Yeah, kind of like a beak, right? In a human being, the face is flat, right? So there's a very famous skeleton of this one that they found, that they named this creature Lucy. It was found, they say it's 3.2 million years old, and it was discovered in Ethiopia in 1974, right? So this is like a famous like find of bones that they found. Right. So this is another one. They also call this Australopithecus, same as the previous one, Australopithecus. But you see the species name is a little bit different. This one says afarensis, the older one, and the one that's slightly newer, africanus. All right. So this one over here, right? Also again upright, but they're saying that this one had like a significantly, larger brain. Right. So they're saying the
Yeah.
brain was only about a third of the size of a human being, but still it's larger than other primates. All right, this one over here is called Homo habilis. All right, so this one over here, they call it habilis because it used to use like a lot of tools. Right, so they say that they were often found with primitive stone tools. So they were taking like stones, like flints and that kind of thing, and chopping them up, breaking them in order to form, tools for maybe making things, maybe, throwing it at animals, whatever it was. All right. That they were using tools like this. In addition, you can see that its jaw doesn't protrude out as much, the same way like a gorilla's jaw does, right? So they're saying its face is a lot more flat. Right? This one over here is called Homo erectus. So you can see here the face is definitely like a lot, flatter, right? So they're showing you the size of the skull here in the Homo erectus, right? So here the skull is still protruding back a little bit, right? So it had a larger brain capacity compared to the Australopithecus. If you take a look at this picture over here, in this picture, right? Do you notice the change in the skull? Like this one over here has like a jaw that protrudes out. This one has a flat jaw, and also this one has a smaller brain. This one has a larger brain. Right? So according to them, they're saying that this is, that this is evidence that these creatures have evolved slowly from one to the other. Right? So this one was called the Neanderthal, right? Homo neanderthalensis, right? So they often, if you see like pictures of Neanderthals, usually they have them as being like very hairy. So they lived in cold climates of Europe. So generally that's where they are thought to have lived. So they're saying that they lived possibly at the same time as modern humans as well. So these creatures are said to have lived 130,000 to 35,000 years ago, right? So 35,000 years ago, maybe there were human beings living at that time, that kind of thing. So I think this one, I think in terms of the clues that people look at, they look at, to understand. So obviously, we don't have all that's left is like a bone, right? You don't have like a brain or any soft tissue that's left. So people still look at clues in order to figure out like what kind of behavior these creatures might have exhibited. You have to look at, different objects. Like you might look at pottery, tools, where they were buried. So they're saying that this creature also used to bury their dead instead of just kind of leaving them somewhere else. So they say that there's a burial site about 100,000 years old. So when a person, when this creature died, they say that it was put into a grave, right? And then this is the skull of a human being, so Homo sapiens, right? So they're saying the earliest form, the earliest fossils of Homo sapiens occurred about 195,000 years ago. So that coincides with the Neanderthal. So they're saying that these two creatures lived at the same period of time, right? So obviously this one over. Sorry, go ahead.
I said yeah.
Okay. All right. So this one over here, they're giving some characteristics of it, right? So they're saying that the eyebrow ridges are very small, right? So if you go back over here, notice like for example the Homo erectus, over its eyebrows, you notice kind of like
it's like a little bit more thicker.
Right. So it's like
like more outside.
Right. So it's like these are called prominent ridges. These are called thick brow ridges, right? So over here in the human being, there's there is not like a thick, brow ridge in that way, right?
Yes.
In addition, tooth size, right, is much smaller than before. So also in addition, before there possibly were canines that were used, just like a meat eater has canines, but in a human being, the canines are very small, and the teeth are basically just smaller in size. So the reason it could be because a human being, generally cooks their food, and so when the food is softer and that kind of thing, it's easier to digest. You don't need like large teeth to crush and grind and stuff like that. People do all of that crushing and grinding, in tools and on the fire, in those kinds of things. They're also, so obviously, if looking back at history, people have left, artwork in caves and that kind of thing. I don't know if you've heard of like their cave paintings from, tens of thousands of years ago, where people drew like kind of like primitive artwork that shows, like animals, or that shows them hunting animals, and that kind of thing. Some show like animals that are already, extinct, that kind of thing, right? People made carvings out of ivory, which is, do you know what ivory is?
No.
So ivory is like, it's basically like a bone. So ivory, so usually people have take ivory from like elephants, like elephant tusks, also like walrus tusks, stuff like that. All of those are made of ivory. So people might, kill an elephant, take its tusks, and then use its tusks, carve its tusks with different kinds of, drawing, artwork and that kind of thing. All right. So I think that's pretty much it for